Today on the Formula Podcast, I have with me Louis Gonzales. He is a notorious storyteller. He's worked on countless Pixar films, his own short films, including Nona, and just really has like a laundry list and of experience storytelling for different companies from Pixar. I believe you're at Netflix now,
Right.
and a handful of other places. Welcome to the show. And before we were had hit record, you had said something along the lines that storytelling is like therapy. Do you wanna dive into that again?
I'll try and I tend to run on. I feel like I like storytelling, but my stories tend to meander. This is why I like editing. I love editing. Editing is like the key to any storytelling because I could ramble. So therapy, it's something that I've heard before that I didn't quite understand when I first started getting into it, of like, the connection of how to connect to stories, right? Because I don't believe that there's one way of anything. I think, entertainment's key. I think losing yourself in stories is key. I think learning stuff in stories is key. I think connection is key. But it doesn't necessarily mean they all have to be this big connected interlocking piece, like one of those old French, safes that you have to like push a button to like do this to find the key, right? It's really tricky. I think that at its core, what I found is that in order to connect, right, to a story, you have to understand what you're searching for, right? I first read this concept with Alan Moore. Right, he wrote a book on how to write comic books, and I wanted to be a comic book, and I still like comics, for a long time. Anyways, he had wrote this thing about writing books, and his whole thing was like, this isn't about like style or structure, or like this is not how I do it. This is how I approach it. And his thing was basically like, I can't write like if someone tells me if I'm going to write a comic book, and the people I'm writing for are like, hey, can you do X Y Z because of some imaginary viewer or audience that doesn't exist, but we're just trying to like make sure we open our arms up enough to grab as many eyes as possible. He made the comment that was like, I don't know how to do that. How do I write for an imaginary person that I don't know if they exist or not? And he had talked about this idea that I just need to know how I connect to the material, right? And if I connect to this material, I have to ask myself, I want this to be scary. Well, what's scary to me? What little things do that? And that to me is when when the idea of therapy started coming up, because if you're not looking at yourself to really find something honest to talk about, and what that means is stuff that you may not want to share even, right? Like if when I tell my story about Nona, it was, like it starts off fun, right? Grandmother and a granddaughter have spending a day and there's wrestling involved. What does that look like? That's the surface level, right? That's kind of what got me in. Those are characters I want to watch and see in that world. But I needed to ask myself, like, why am I connected to it? Why is my mind still thinking about this? Why is this meaningful to me? Right. And that's when the therapy part happens. That's when you start looking at yourself and going, oh, this is about, I didn't get a chance to really say goodbye to my grandma. This is like, I really respect my grandma. Like I love everything that she kind of brought to my, my youth in a lot of ways. And who she was really matters to me. So I wanted to celebrate that. And when you find that out, you have this deeper connection to these characters that you still want them to kind of make their own decisions, but you now have an interesting and insightful emotional way, a connection to that character to allow them to do things, to like not judge them and force them in spaces where you're allowing the plot to drive you, but yet you're kind of asking yourself, well, what would they do in that situation? Because you have that connection now. You've made that point. And essentially when you're done with the project, right? When I'm done with it, you reflect on these projects that you complete, these stories that you tell, and you go, even if it's like years later, you go like, oh, I was going through that then. I totally see how that connected to my life, because I just don't see how any story I tell now won't be the same. Even though I try to tell the same story, it won't be the same in 10 years because we constantly grow, hopefully. Hopefully we constantly grow. So I'll tell different stories about the phases of my life, as most people do. You kind of lose interest, you gain interest, you are growing as an individual. So like your insight to characters change. And that's why I love story so much. I mean, I love story because it isn't just film. Storytelling we use in so many things in our lives. It's invisible most of the time, but almost every story drives damn near everything in our current culture.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like we were talking about this before and we were just talking. When I was asking you questions, you were just popping right into like storytelling mode where you're like, "Oh yeah, and like I was gonna get this tattoo with the whalebone." And it's something like you said, no matter what you're doing, whether it's sales, whether you're writing films, whether you're applying for a job, whatever it is, like it comes down to your ability to tell a good story. And it's interesting what you said when you said, "Does this scare me?" Do you mean like when you're writing the story, does it feel like something that makes you feel uncomfortable when you're writing it because it's so close to home? How do you
Yeah.
know? How do you know that that it's that fear versus like some other feeling you're having?
Oh, it's super easy, right? The fact that you're trying to not to say it, right? You're like, I can't go there. I'm not going
Mm,
to talk about that. That's when I go, I need to talk about that, right? I at least need to explore it because the truth is hard. The truth hurts, right? The reason why we kind of social media is great because you can kind of devise this look, this you can curate this identity, right? It's something that's very hard to do with yourself. Like we can never curate our own identity to ourselves, right? When we look in the mirror, we see all the scars, all the negativity if we, that we see about ourselves that we go like, I wish I just had a six pack like so and so. Oh, I wish I had this, that, and the other thing, right? We can't look at ourselves. That stuff's hard to look at, but that's where story's great. Because if I'm telling a story and like, for example, right, I'll just use my own story as an example. Right. So in that short with Nona, I needed to find a place that was meaningful, right? Meaning that I just didn't need a plot point, right, that changed the story. I wanted to push her to her wits and then see how she reacted. And initially I had her react really abrasively, and it's kind of realistic because it's not like I didn't see that in my life at some point. A kid getting snatched up by their grandma to, you stay still or whatever. But that didn't feel right for her, right? Because she wasn't angry, right? I understood at a certain point, I understood that she was just like, I love you and I love this. And these two things represent something very meaningful to me. So in that moment where she reacted to the thing that the little girl does, it needed to be something honest. And I liked the knee jerk reaction of like, what did you just do? And I'm angry. But then you see the little kid that's like, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't know. I was just trying to get your attention. And for her to take that in that moment and try and like just bawl, like I never wanted her to cry because my grandma was tough. I never saw her cry. And so that's what was the driving force on the surface was that she was a grandma that was tough. She wasn't Betty White. She wasn't like these grandmas that you see on TV that are like, oh, let me bake you cookies. She was more like, I'll snatch you by your shirt, but also give you a big ass hug, and that's something that I wanted to put out into the world. Another character, another way of seeing a grandma. You know what I mean? Like we don't need to regurgitate the same ways unless we have a different way in. But that is so hard at the time for me to go, yeah, she should cry, right? Because I don't.
mhm,
I built her up as this kind of tough, strong, has it together kind of woman, and then for her to break down and cry in that moment, it didn't seem. I think what I realized was that I didn't want to project her that way, right?
mhm,
Which is vastly different than allowing her to kind of for it to feel right, right? To feel emotionally correct. You know what I mean? To feel that she would be torn and that this was just a travesty. It's a hard moment in her life that she's like, I'm just trapped. I'm in this moment where I didn't see these two things colliding, and here it is at its worst face. And how do I react? Well, of course I react emotionally at first, which is like angry. And I realize as a little kid, this is someone I love. They didn't mean it. Therefore, tears come out, right? Because that to me is like you let your guard down. You kind of have to accept the situation. And that's why it felt natural. But I was pushing back against that so much. You know what I mean? It was like I just didn't want her to break down. It's because it was just selfish. But I needed to kind of really look at the situation and understand my connection to it and understand what it's trying to do so that I can allow it to be something versus trying to force it to be something. I mean, storytelling, I think, is just, you have to be vulnerable, about yourself, about, asking questions, not trying to be smart, not trying to be intellectually like, oh, in this book about storytelling, you're supposed to do X, Y, Z by now. In storytelling, formulas don't necessarily, they work enough, but they may not have the gravitas to really make it something you want to watch over and over, I think.
mhm,
There's no absolutes, mind you, but my way in, my belief, my understanding, the things that I love, I don't need them to be perfect, right? No one's perfect, but I love when it has that gravitas, when it feels like it's an opinion. It's a me and you talking, right? It doesn't feel like you're talking to like a mass of people where it's like, let me keep this very clear and simple so everyone gets it. Story films are funny to me because I feel like it is that,
mm,
but it's also you get into the details of how relationships and how people work. And I think to me, that's the beauty of film is that you have these sweeping, conceptual ideas of, a space village, whatever that means. You know what I mean? A rock opera, a dramatic storytelling and, wherever, an action adventure film. All of these kind of ideas, these wrappers are great. They constitute fun, they constitute excitement, they constitute drama, but you need to go in and have that human, like those vulnerable ideas that we have as human beings. That helps us to really connect and empathize with characters, right? Because if characters just go and they slay dragons and it's hard, that's fun. It's a thrill ride. Nothing wrong with that, you know. But I think in the end, what really draws us back to film and draws us back to storytelling always is the human connection component, right? How we feel that human truth, right? Not it isn't a truth bigger, like, you know, there's the human truth and then there's the details around it, cultural, gender, all that stuff that make it feel different.
Yeah.
But we're all afraid, right? So why wouldn't most of our stories deal with that in some regard in different ways? You know, it's all fear, and the storyteller's job is to be vulnerable enough to kind of allow that to happen, to kind of corral it to happen a little bit.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that, and it's giving me, it's like making me sweat a little, because you're like, because when you're writing the story, it's almost like you're writing for an audience of one. Like if you
Yeah,
try to write for an audience of everyone, it's like no one really relates to it. But if you're writing from your personal experience to somebody who's maybe had a grandma that was the same way or experienced something similar to what you're writing about, it's going to hit home so hard for those people. And that's how you create like people who love your work. I'm guessing.
yeah. I mean, I'll tell you this. What was the most interesting thing to me is that it's such a it's such a weird, vulnerable place to be when you put something out like in the world. Because you know, who doesn't want to be like just cure cancer, right? Who doesn't want to like bring world peace? Right? No one's ever going like, I just want to be okay, right? You want to have an impact, right? You know, and it doesn't mean it has to have big impact, but you want it to have some impact. And you just don't know. Like for me, I figured, you know, at least it'll probably have impact with, you know, maybe, you know, dudes from LA like me, or, you know, maybe a little bit of Mexico or something like that. But my biggest surprise was loving that different people, gender, country was, I had that, right? And it could have been like my grandma was super into soccer. My mom and dad my grandma was really into football. My grandma and I used to love watching wrestling, right? Like luchador wrestling, you know, like, and she used to take me, like, so I was getting these stories in my LinkedIn inboxes and stuff like that of like, this is how it connected for me and my grandmother. And I just loved that, because that to me is the power of story, right? That's the power of film is, you know, we seem less alone, you know, in such a lonely world. Like I feel like we're in a state where loneliness has never been higher, right? Even
Hmm.
though connection is been the most it's ever been, somehow we're all getting lost in this fray. And so like these stories that we put up on screen, I feel like it's even more important now than ever to have these real connections, these real human truths, these pains that we all deal with, that we overcome, right? Because I was talking to this with someone. I'm like, sorry, sidebar real quick. The idea of change, right? You know, I love that we love movies. I think we love the narrative hero structure, because ultimately we all want to be heroes, right? I think that we all want to be heroes in our story, right? Because we are the heroes or victims, and most of us waffle between the both, right? Sometimes I'm a victim, sometimes I'm a hero. You just, you know, that's who we are. We're complex creatures, right? And so movies are great because they're so simplistic in the sense that we're going to watch a character regardless who they are, candelabra, cat, toy, woman, man, you know, you name it, whatever the way in is that it's just a means to simplify that. Look, you can change and you'll be better for it at the end. We love happy endings, right? So if you compare most of these connections to us as human beings, not even just as a theoretical level, I'm talking about an emotional connection level. We want to believe that we can change. I think that's why we love film so much. That's my theory. I just want to change. When I watch a movie of someone getting away with something and surviving this, you know, like I just saw Godzilla -1, and I loved it, you know, and I just loved everything it had to say about it, you know, about what it says in the movie, about what it speaks on. And this guy changes, right? It's a real great arc, and he has to fight Godzilla, and it's huge. But you can relay his change to something that you're doing that's huge in your life. What's your Godzilla, basically? You know what I mean? What are you trying to stop? And that to me is what makes it powerful, is that it just helps me go like, you know what? If that dude beat Godzilla, I know this is stupid. Like this doesn't make sense right now. Like I know that guy beat Godzilla, so I can probably at least defeat my want to drink soda every day, or I can change marginally, right? Because change is so hard for us as human beings to do, right? I mean, if we're really lucky, by the time if we go from our 20s to our 60s, we're really lucky if we're actually, you know, be able to be vulnerable with ourselves and our loved ones, right? That I think is that's a huge change. That's a huge character arc over 40 years or whatever it is. We're lucky if we do that. Sometimes some of us don't even look for that change, right? And so like movies bring that about. It kind of celebrates that inner thing that we all want inside of us, which is that opportunity to be better, right? Because I think if you stand at yourself in the mirror, you look at yourself in the mirror, you know all your flaws, and you put your makeup on, your hats, my beanie, my stuff to kind of armor up against that person and kind of project this other thing. Well, you know, when we do that, you know, it's really hard to look at yourself, right?
Hmm.
And I think that movies help us do that.
Yeah. It's one, and I think what you were talking about with how you present yourself online, how everyone presents himself online is like, look at this beautiful picture I took from this beautiful trip, how awesome
Yeah.
it was. The video that or the film that I worked on was like I went and did the Azungate trek in Peru, which is super
Oh,
high
cool.
altitude. You know, if I wanted to portray that I was really badass and cool, I just would have taken a picture of myself like on top of the mountain, being like, I killed it, you know, like,
Yeah.
but instead, you know, I got altitude sickness. I had to take oxygen. So I put like
Oh,
a
shit.
video of that up. Yeah, I mean,
That's great.
I'm fine, but I put a picture up of I had to ride like the horse ambulance, so I put a picture up of the guy, me and the guy who like guided the ambulance. He's like, I don't know what the right term is. I know they're gauchos in Argentina, but I'm not sure what the term would be in Peru. But you know,
Gotcha.
he's got like his like Peruvian upper mountain attire, and you know, I'm like, hey, I kind of climbed a mountain, but like I wouldn't have done it without this dude, and like this happened. I feel like I'd be lying almost, or like not maybe not lying, but maybe lying to myself if I was saying like, yeah, look at how cool this was. And I think it's when you tell stories, it's like you have to have that bad part, the part where you're like, yeah, I was supposed to be like, I trained so hard and I was supposed to be super badass and climb this mountain, but I'm riding a donkey up halfway because I got altitude sickness, and because nobody kind of goes through their story unscathed or without bad days. So I think maybe that's where like the commonality is found, or like the pieces of of the story that they relate to the most. Because if you win every day, then like I applaud you so much. Like I'm very happy for you, but I don't think anybody wins every day.
Yeah. Actually, I would say like I don't value people winning every day. I don't value me winning every day. How about that?
Yeah.
I can't put it on other people, but
hmm
I value that, I didn't win young. Like everything that got me to where I'm at currently in the way I approach stuff comes from hard-earned experience, right? Comes from me being, put into a position where I was supposed to, I could have easily failed. And yet I wanted to learn so much that I just sat down, I was like a tick, I just dug in and held on for dear life because I just wanted those like, nutrients of what art could be, what storytelling is, all this experience was around me. I just was like, I need to learn as much as possible. So yeah, all that hardship, is what develops you as a human being because testing yourself, right? If you go back to the Stoics, or if you even go, to other filmmakers and talk about, like if you look at Spielberg or Coppola, not Spielberg, but Coppola, working with Russell, working at, on outside films before he became who he is, right? No one's an overnight success for the most part. Majority of people have been striving and grinding a long time, getting tons of no's, right? Go back to like the Mad Men was refused, like was rejected like, hundreds of times. And, these are the things that make us stronger, right? I think that just like the Stoics, practicing this idea of understanding hardship and having a relationship with it is key, especially with when you're talking about vulnerability and like trying to be honest with yourself and with people, right? Because like you said, like I can't write a story for like this imaginary audience. The story I'm writing for is me at first. And then when I get that first draft down, it's really nice to go, okay, either I have an idea of how I want to rewrite it right away, or I have some friends I can kind of pass it to and just go like, hey, read this and give me your thoughts, and they kind of understand me well enough to kind of go, oh, well, I'm seeing this, that, and the other thing, right? They're not trying to tell me, oh, what if it was this? What if it was that? They're more like, well, what were you trying to do there? And that's very helpful because it creates a spotlight that I can see it in a different way. Because when you go in and write, everything is living in your head. And what you get on paper, for the most part, needs to be edited, needs to be rewritten to a point where it gets, it's
Yeah.
a sharp spear. And I
hmm
feel like you need people to do that with you. You know what I mean? So it's a hard endeavor, but it's choosing to be in it. You have to know that is what it's about. It's what life's about. It's not about pleasantries and comfort. That's a nice thing to take when you need it. I think that, we only have so much time on this earth. Personally, I don't need to build some sort of like, I'm not trying to like leave my mark on this world, because I can't control that. I can't do that. As a result, I can't do that. If that happens, that happens. All I can control is what I want to find, the way I approach my work and the meaning that it has and the excitement it gives me, so that I can then see if that echoes with society, with, how it echoes, right? Because it is a form of like, hey, how's it going? It is a form of introducing yourself and kind of allowing yourself to be out there, especially these days where you're just as likely to get torn down as you are to get built up almost equally. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Hardship is key, man. That's why it comes back to like that hard question, that thing that you may not want to say in your story, the thing that might feel like a little bit too vulnerable for you. That's the stuff that I think is where the gold is, because you don't have to do it one for one, but acknowledging it allows it to happen in its own natural way. So
Yeah.
the idea of comfort in a process like this doesn't make sense to me. I'm either all in or I'm not, right? I believe in that. I have to be 100% into the thing I'm doing. I can't be in here and here and here and here, right? It's got to be
Mhm.
this, because when I put my time on it, I can't be divided. It's got to be about that. And so that is really hard to do, is to really dedicate and be all in, especially with something that doesn't exist, that you're trying to put out there, that you want to connect, and that has all this other, peripherally emotional connection to what this is that you are doing and how it represents you or how people may see you. That is where, the discomfort to me really lives, at least for me.
Yeah. And it's almost like the first feedback you get. I've worked on a few many different things, whether it's talks, pitches, stories, video scripts, and that first initial feedback you get, I feel like it's always the one that hurts the most because you're like, damn, I thought I nailed it. But and as you said, it's like when you get that on paper the first time. I did a Kickstarter a few months ago and got the book funded. I had like drafts written already, and now
Congrats.
I'm on the thanks. Congratulate me when I get the final draft out, because I'm on the last I'm on the last draft, and I'm like, I think that now that I know that this final draft is going out to be in people's hands, I'm just like, holy shit, this needs to be like, this is not my best work yet. So it's almost like even after multiple rounds of editing, it still feels like you have this piece of clay or stone, and you're just slowly like chipping away, and it just then until you get to that final, like, hopefully masterpiece, not like some mutant looking thing, but something that just looks like what you envision in your head, or at least people see it in the way that you envision it. So
Yeah.
I think that's the process part. I think that writing the first, like the shitty first draft, is kind of the easy part, but then once you get the feedback, then you're like, damn, my baby's ugly. And then, then you're like, and then you have to get to the work of like chiseling almost.
Yeah.
But I think that's where like the beauty of it comes from, is like kind of taking out the stuff that doesn't make sense, adding in the other pieces. But I guess I'm curious, what does your process look like? Like if you once you have an idea for something, what do you do?
I try and work in layers, right? So I think first off, like when I have a concept, you know what I mean? Like I'm playing with this idea of, I'm not playing, I'm gonna do it, but I'm like trying to get this track started where I want to get into children's books, right? I have like 4 ideas that I want to play out, that I want to explore, and these ideas are like these seeds. So I try and gather seeds, right? And I store them in a. I use this app called Ample Note, and I love it to death because it's super simple. It has four divisions, and what it does is like I'll just jot stuff, I'll jot it down, whatever I'm thinking, and it'll break it down into notes where it'll be separate things, right? So I can go back to it. But what I love about it is that I just want to feed and nurture these seeds until they sprout. And I just don't know when they're going to sprout. So I kind of basically, I have a garden of ideas that I sprinkle on as I go. And the ones that sprout are the ones I jump onto, right? I get on and I try and get that really, what you said is easy, which is really hard for me, the first draft out. Right. Because
Mm,
I'm very judgmental. I want it to be something specific, like you kind of like, I want this greatness right away. And it doesn't work that way. For me, at least, it's like,
yeah.
there's a reason why editing is key. There's a reason why rewriting is key, because it's akin to, sculpting a marble out of statue, or sculpting a statue out of marble. Right? It's big chisel, not big shapes. And then you want to get into the sanding and refinement to get into the details. And both of those are very hard, right? So I love film in that way of like storytelling, is that you have to be, 1,000-foot view, and you have to be detail orientated. And it's hard to do both and you want to do both in the first draft, which is why it's really hard for me. But, in the end, once you get it down, I can put it away, start on another thing that's sprouted, so I can give myself time away from this to try and see things with fresh eyes until I get one that is actually needing to be done by a certain date, right? So I just try and nurture my creative nursery, as it will, with all these ideas that may not see the light of day. Probably most of them won't, maybe. But my goal is not to act like they won't. My goal is to like put them out there and find the ones that fit, because I think the other aspect is, because I don't have the money just to fund myself for all my fleeting, ideas, that you're working with somebody else that's going to fund that money. It's going to help put it out there. And so developing those relationships is key as well. And so listening to them in terms of like, what has the best chance of success right now? Okay, that might be an idea that I already kind of I didn't get the sprout yet. But I will now focus on that to see if I can get it to sprout. You know what I'm saying? So I don't like the pressure of being like, this is all in it. I like tending to a garden. And then when that one is ready, when I know that I'm growing, that's what I get into. That's what I nurture to grow to as full a shape as possible, whatever that means, because, I can only control how much I put into it. I can only control, what I know at that time. Right. And in the end, I have to look at it in a way that isn't so meaningful where I'm going to shoot myself in the foot by it needing to be this thing that is impossible. Right. It's kind of like my analogy would be as if, I don't know if you're into baseball at all. You into baseball, Trevor?
Yeah, I'm familiar. I don't watch it anymore, but
You're familiar.
back in the day when like
Yeah, when I was 5. But the thing was is that you understand what a hitter is, and a hitter, like if you tell a hitter to go up there and hit a home run, like the biggest thing you can do, that's an insane amount of pressure for something that you quite can't control because it isn't that easy, right?
Mhm.
You're going up there with the idea of putting the ball in play and getting on base, right? I think that's ultimately like get in play, get on base, right? If I'm swinging for the fences, whatever. But you're if you're only going out there for one outcome, right, for a home run, I feel like you take away all the other options that you can do, right? Bunt, hit for a sacrifice. There's other ways you can pitch in to get to help the team to maneuver stuff, to keep things moving. And I feel like that's the same with ideas and stories is that I want to make sure that it's the story I'm trying to tell right now is relevant to where society's at because art is a reflection of where society is. And everything that I like that I might want to talk about may not be of the time of now. You know what I mean? And my job isn't to worry about the time of now, really. I can't create for an imagining artist that doesn't know exists, right? Because it's not me. I can only create for me and people like me, so to speak. So, I want to make sure that I have a lot of things that I like so when the timing strikes with partners that feel excited by it, I can jump into that and get it done. You know what I mean? So it is a factor of it is my artwork, but also it's a business and it's also a means of like, relationship building and curating relationships to make these things, to get these things done. I mean, I'm a big believer in the team ethic. I love animated films and film in general because as great as any one director, writer, or whatever is, no one makes it on their own. They have to bring in people to help realize this vision. And when they do that, those people bring bits and bobs that helps elevate the material. This communal effort for art is beautiful to me because it's not a self-serving, right? It's very much about a community developing something for a bigger community, a small community developing something for a bigger community. You know what I mean? So you have a lot more layers involved potentially because of that. Now, some creators are very good about having all the answers and having everything, but I would say even then they still have people they listen to that they kind of will get notes from. I don't think anyone completely does it alone. I don't know for a fact, but that's my belief in it. So why not? Why not just make something that makes you feel good, right? Why not concentrate on what excites you, and try and give it its proper time to really see where it goes. And if it falls off and you lose steam, then let it go aside, pick up the next thing, But if I'm just one idea, like this is it, there's nothing wrong with that either. But I like the idea that I don't have just one thing to say. I mean, I'm older now, when I was younger, I might have only a few things to say, but now I just feel like there's so many places to play and things I'm not seeing that I want to see out in the world, that I want to talk about, and I don't know how much of the things I want to talk about when they'll connect, but I try and have enough things ready so that I can develop them to connect, and if no one's buying them, I like them. I still develop them anyway. You know what I mean? Because I still care about them. That's the beautiful thing is like, even if no one's paying me for it, then maybe I might go, you know what? I'm going to just put it on myself. I'm going to self-publish this. That's how much I care about it because there's a certain amount of risk when you go on your own. Right. But that risk is also a high risk is also high reward. You know what I mean? We can probably recount numerous artists and stories of artists that came out of nowhere, right? That just believed in, like I'll use that Mad Men reference again. Like I got rejected hundreds of times or whatever it was to find a space to make it one of the best shows, series in TV history, right? Can you imagine going through all those no's, but he had to believe in it. He did. And we're all happier for it. You know what I mean? Because the timing had to be right for it to come out. You had to find the right partners. Timing is a huge thing.
Yeah, and I think that that makes sense where things can change, where like, you might have an idea right now where the society's like not ready for it, Whereas in 10 years from now, it might be at a place where it makes more sense. So
Yeah.
it's not always a reflection of how good the story is. It's more of a reflection of like right place, right time. I believe there's some level of like, what's the word I'm thinking of? Not luck, but maybe a little luck. It's like
A lot of
just
luck.
right. maybe right fit. Yeah, I guess luck. So you keep saying like you have your, I like what you said, you have your nursery of ideas. How do you know when one's ready?
I don't know if I ever know when it's absolutely ready. All I know is that, I mean, okay, I lie. Like basically, if you know kind of like where it's going and you understand your character, and it kind of like is a place that you kind of constantly want to revisit,
Hmm.
and you feel the inclination to get it done because it's like it's seemingly clear,
Hmm.
then get a version, and I'll get a version of it down, right? I'll just write it all the way out and or draw some of it and kind of like piece together a version of it that I'm seeing in any way, whether it's
Hmm.
through drawing or through writing. I want to step away from it or pass it off to some friends of mine or get it or even, I'll pitch it to my family, you know what I mean? Like, and they'll
Hmm.
tell me like, oh, what they think, right? Because I don't think that
Hmm.
just professionals alone give you great insight into like making your stories better. I think
Yeah.
sometimes having an audience that has no connection to what you do so they can react purely to it, and they'll always say stuff like this. I don't think I have the right answers. I won't have, and I'm like, I'm not looking for the right answers, right? There is no such thing as the right answer, right?
Yeah.
I need to see it through a different lens so I can see what I don't see. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So when it's ready, I feel it. You know what I mean? And it feels like I can assign it a time to get something done in it. That's very practical, right? A draft or two. Maybe it's a draft with a movie poster because I'm seeing whatever I'm seeing, I'm trying to get down to the
Hmm.
point where I lose steam. Right. Because the only way for me a project gets to a creative finish line is either I'm going like, hey, I'm going to shoot a short and I want to do it by July because I haven't really made anything in a year. I just want to make something. Right. So I'm going to work on that short until I shoot it. You know what I mean? Like, because now it has a goal, it has a framework, right? But until something has a framework like that, because a lot of other ideas are like, well, it might be dependent on finding partners for printing. It might be finding partners for, film,
Yeah.
animated film or live action film, whatever it is. There's a lot of this idea of filmmaking relies on a good amount of money. So it makes it hard just to kind of go out and do it yourself. But small little projects like children's books, illustrating, put them online, web comics, or, little videos you can shoot that you don't mind them not looking like they were shot on a red, with anamorphic lenses for IMAX. It's just that,
Yeah.
oh, my iPhone, here's some video. It's me kind of exercising something fun, right?
Hmm.
To me, the act of creativity is nothing more than just, it's a journal of sorts. You know what I mean? It's the
Hmm.
Rick Rubin idea that these things are like journal entries in your life. These pieces of art, these stories you tell, these things you create, even if they don't go all the way to an audience, it's all you kind of, again, it goes back to therapy in a way of like you're digging at these things that what make us human beings, right? What makes me a human being? Like, how do I connect? What are these things that connect to? Everything's so interconnected. And I mean that. I mean math and art and architecture and, you can name it. You can pretty much anything you can relate to film or to art itself relates to many things in life. You know what I mean? Because you're really studying you're studying ourselves, right? Art is the act of studying ourselves and relaying it in a way that helps us learn a lesson. Hopefully we don't, but hopefully it does in some regard. You know what I mean? Like, and so to know it's right, I feel like it's just something that you're ready to get it done. You're ready to take it to a place it needs to get to. Right. Some things need money and partnerships, and some things you can do on your own. And that will dictate to me when I jump at it to try and finish it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How do you build those partnerships as let's say, so you have your draft or your story that's done and you need partners, whether it's somebody who comes in, like film partners, people who work on the project with you, or maybe it's people who are funding it.
Yeah, it's, you talk to friends, you reach out. I mean, I just to circle back, so me like a little bit, like when I got in animation, my whole thing was I came in with that. I didn't go to art college, right? So I was very behind the curve because everyone else went to art college, went to animation college, whatever. So their vernacular for speaking was completely different than mine. You know what I mean? I didn't understand half the things they were saying, about theories in art, but I didn't want to learn, right? And so I used every opportunity to hustle up as much information because you can't just read books and go like, oh yeah, 2 + 2 = 4 and I can apply that. I needed to hear it from people and how they approach it, right? It's teach me how to fish, not just give me fish. You know what I mean? So I would always take I would always take like veteran artists out to lunch. I'd ask them out to lunch. I'll go, hey, let me talk to you. Can I take you to lunch? I'll buy you lunch, whatever. And mind you, I'm an intern, right? So, or I'm not an intern. Was I a trainee? So I'm not making a lot of money. But that's besides the point. I was still making way more money than I was when I was pushing carts at Ralph's, at a supermarket. But anyways, I always laughed at they made way more money than me, and almost damn near every one of them let me buy them lunch. Like they took the lunch, they took the free lunch. And I always thought that was funny because I'm like, you're the vet in this situation. Wouldn't you want to
Yeah.
like take care of the youngsters? But that's why I think that's makes the story better. The fact that they were like, "Thank you for my lunch," and they talked, but they gave me a lot of valuable information. You know what I mean? So I really feel like these relationships you build aren't just for me. Like they're part of them are for me to develop how to develop relationships, right? Because not everyone you're going to hit 100%, but I treat it like storytelling. It's a portion of the process of working with people that I like. And
Hmm.
you're not going to like working with everybody, and everyone's not going to like working with you, but my job isn't to clam up and to feel bad. My job is to keep moving, asking people, engaging with people, and talking about what that could look like. What do you love when you make film? Like if I'm talking to you, what drives you, Trevor, to make the films you're making or to write what you're writing? What drives you? And then when we have that conversation, I'll be like, damn, you know what? Yeah, like I have this notion that I just want to be on a pirate ship forever. You know what I mean? And all that means is like I want to be rowing in the same direction to take the shit I want to take with this team behind me that want to take the same shit. And what that means is not to actually go steal shit, but just to go and try and get to a place with as much earnestness and passion to give or to take, than it is to just kind of passively roll around like in a ship that's going in circles because everyone has their own agenda, right? Pirate ship, everyone has the same agenda. Right. And that's what I want. And I feel like the creative endeavor needs to be a little bit like a pirate ship. Hey, you could tell me, hey, Louis, a cruise ship has the same endeavor. But I go, but everyone is chilling on a cruise ship. No one wants to do ship. Cruise ship is retirement. In my mind, a pirate ship is an active, factual thing. We are all hungry to go earn a better life, for ourselves and our loved ones, whatever, however you want to take that as a pirate, but that's what I'm looking for. I love passion. You had mentioned earlier that, the idea of timing, and I worked on a film that was a great film and it just was dropped. I mean, Iron Giant is a great film. And I loved it, not just as a film because I worked on it. I valued my experience I got from the people I worked with. To see the leader of that show just be so passionate about film, and it wasn't judgmental. It was like I felt like it was as close to like being on the steps, in Greece with Socrates, hearing, discussing philosophy.
Yeah.
And that to me is what made it fun because film is like philosophy in that way, where you're discussing things about people, about human nature that you might agree with, you might not. But if it's done right, you empathize with the character enough so that you can actually create a conversation that is less about what I believe and more about, oh, that was interesting. I never saw it that way before. Right. That to me is why I love story. You know what I mean? That's why I love storytelling, is that there's just this, maybe it's just like having having candid conversation that's really hard to have these days. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Everyone has their opinion and they want to stick to it. And, it's a level of, I know, like the fact that people learn, can get so much information and have this idea of being intelligent without the idea of what intelligence is, right? Which is, to me, intelligent is more about listening and trying to understand your point of view, Trevor, than it is about what I know about myself already, right? That to me is someone who's intelligent is trying to find that. And I feel like nowadays there's a lot of like I know with the headbutting, about what we our belief systems, and when you're thinking about your character, oftentimes you think about their belief system. And so I went off in a way bad tangent. I'm sorry, Trevor. I'm going to shut up now.
No, that was great. I enjoyed all that because we were talking about like how, how to find those partners. And I think you made a lot of great points, like finding people who have the same interests or passions that drive them. Networking, I guess you could call it, buying people lunch. Maybe it's coffee, maybe it's
Yeah.
just finding a way to get time with people who have, I mean, who are farther along that are able to provide something. I think it's hard because because of how connected we are. A lot of people have requests coming in, especially when they get to a certain level.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the number of asks they get is ridiculous. But if you can just find a way, like even this conversation we're having on this podcast, right? Like I'm learning something from you. Whenever you come out with your children's books or something like that, I hope that I can help push them out. And so it's a
No,
mutual
I know.
exchange a bit where
Yeah.
like I'm not just taking your time and being like, all right, thank you for teaching me. See you later. Have a nice day. It's like you've been gracious enough to give me your time, so I want to give you some like I it's kind of like nobody's asking for anything really. It's just kind of like being a good member of the community you're participating in. I think
Absolutely.
maybe that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like I said yes to this because I liked what this podcast is trying to do. When I looked
Mhm.
at it, I was like, oh wow, all these very different people that you're talking to glean information about us as human beings in different regards is beautiful. I'd love to be a part of that, right? And to me, that's all. Like anything beyond that is all bonus, right? Because I don't have expectations about anything other than the yes or the thing I say okay to, right? Like if say at the end of this, you're like, F you, Louis, you make no sense. Why you're a waste of space. I'm not saying you would say that, but just say that that's how we dismounted. I'm gonna be fine. You know what I mean? Because, like that's just, we didn't work out. You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
what I loved about your podcast, you're generally interested in understanding people in different situations, right? In their professional lives, in how they've operated professionally.
Mhm.
I love that because that fascinates me as a topic tremendously. I love reading about, like, I'm reading this book right now. It's a real simple book to read, but it's like the 38 letters of JD Rockefeller to his son. Right. And it's a fantastic book because you know what? I'm going like, how many things that he said in 1930 or whenever it was written, 1940s, that I've either said or I can relate to. I'm like, this is amazing. Or like, reading Marcus Aurelius, like reading his thoughts about
Mhm.
what was going on in his time and how he's processing it. I'm like, yeah, take away some of the details, I understand it in that similar way internally. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's what these podcasts I love are for, whether it's Huberman or like, all these other podcasts that I listen to. It's all about connection, and like hearing these different points of view. And not just because I want to agree or disagree, it's because I generally want to understand how people think.
Mhm.
And, I think it reinforces some things that you believe in, but it also might break conceptions that you might have had, about those things that you didn't really know. You weren't in that space to really make a judgment about those, about what was going on. But yet we do have slight judgments or have preconceived notions about people and places or things. So it's important. I just love it because it's about sharing, just to circle it back. Like this conversation we have, we're just sharing. And if other people connect to it, great. If
Yeah.
they don't, hey, either they're not ready for it or it's just not for them.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? I'm not going to work. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly. And I think I used to say this thing for, so I learned how to dance a long time ago. Like I learned how to do salsa and then I got into swing
All
dancing.
right.
And dude, as a white man, my hips do not move the way they're supposed to in salsa. The effort it took to be able to to like properly, do you dance at all? Do you know how to salsa?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, so like you how you're supposed to kind of like move your hips didn't really work for me, but I had to get really comfortable like looking like an idiot. Like I had a conversation with someone a long time ago and they're like, you try a lot of stuff, you don't really seem to care about like when you start, like what you look like or anything. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, because you have to suck for a certain amount of time at anything that you want to be good at. So you just have to like suck long enough until you like earn the right to be good. So I
Yeah.
think you kind of made that point earlier when you're talking about writing up like telling stories and things like that. Stories some people will never see is a lot of, you don't see all the losses or all the Google Docs or the notes on the phone of all the stories people have written and never seen the light of day. You just see the thing that's like new director wins Academy Award and you're like, oh wow, how lucky is he first time around? But maybe he's got 1,000 stories he's already told and
Yeah.
made. So I think, I don't know, I like that point that you made. So I wanted to come back to it a little bit.
Well, there's something you said in there that it's a belief, right? Like for me, okay, here's the belief, right? Let me give you let's go pyramid, right? Reverse pyramid. Let me give you the point first. To me, life is suffering, right? And that doesn't mean that we're in bad positions. It just means emotionally, like, our connection to other people. It's hard. It's suffering. But I think that you need to make a choice because if you don't choose suffering, you're gonna suffer you're gonna suffer regardless. So for me, I'm like, what's the best use of suffering, right? I have to choose the suffering I want to get to where I want to be, right? To learn the things I want to learn, right? Most people don't love a good diet, right? Who doesn't love sneaking in some sweets and shit every now and again, right? But if you choose to have a healthy diet, you're going to feel better, right? If you
Yes.
choose to exercise, you're going to feel better. You're going to last longer in the chair, whatever it is. And that is not easy. It's suffering, right? It's a bit of like what we don't want to do, waking up early or whatever it is that gets you. I love that it's a choice. It is effectively a choice. And I'll tell you a story that goes along with that real short. So I was working with this guy, very respected, story artist in the industry, right? And he's now since passed, but he was this guy that was a part of, a big part of Pixar. And I asked him one day because I was trying to get into storyboarding, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll help you." And I was like, "Whoa, this guy is one of the main people, right?" So I was like, all right. And so he was just helping me. Nicest guy in the world. Everyone loved him. He was just a really good person, right? And I remember one time sitting there going like, he was helping me out and he was drawing over it and he was smiling. And I said, man, it must be so nice to just have that disposition where you're just a good guy all the time. You're just a good guy. And he like, the only time I saw him go, he's smiling, he's like, went straight face and looked at me and was like, I wake up every day and I choose to be this. I don't get this for free. You know what I mean? And that rocked my world because it was such a insightful thing to say that I still reflect on that. I still remember to this day because it was so meaningful in the sense that you have to choose. You have to choose. You know, like when you're asking about what ideas are right, I just choose how to keep moving forward. I don't want to stand still. So I choose to move, whether it's in the snow, in the sun, in the rain, or in the sunshine. I move regardless because that's what I'm choosing to do. Right? I don't want to be a victim in my story. I don't even care about being a hero, to be honest. I just want to be moving forward in my story so that my arc will complete in whatever that means, in whatever which way it's supposed to.
That's a really good. I mean, not every day, like we said earlier, is going to be a great day, but the choices you
Yeah.
make. I like that what you said there about the this. What did you say? It was like the suck that you choose or something like that. Um,
Basically.
yeah. So whatever thing that you choose to do, you have to like go through kind of like the quote unquote trenches, I guess. So for new storytellers, people who, I mean, you have a wealth of experience. You've been doing this for, I don't mean to age you at all, but you've been doing it for a long time. And
Yeah. Over
what,
25 years. I'll say
that's crazy,
it.
man. That's been a,
You're
I bet
telling
that's been
me you're talking to a guy who thought it was going to be out in 2 years, and here I am 25 years later. Just like actually, it's more than 25. But anyways, but even to the fact of like being at Pixar for 22 years. I was there for 22 years before I decided to leave. And I didn't leave in bad terms. It was mutual in that way, or at least it was from my side. I was just ready to move on. You know what I mean? Like something in me was just like, okay, maybe you're feeling too comfortable. It's time to get uncomfortable again. Because my whole career has been. I came in, I felt like I was behind the eight ball. What did I do? I sat down and worked. I sat in the suffering of feeling like I'm less than everybody else because I didn't know half the things that they said. But that didn't matter to me. Like how I felt about myself did not matter in that moment because it was more important about what I wanted to take away than how I saw myself fitting in that situation. Right.
Mhm.
Now, that might seem like I always had it on lock in that way, which I didn't. But at least in this very one regard, I was able to make a choice that allowed me to extend my career and stay and be helpful in a place that I was able to work on a lot of really good films with a lot of really good people. Not everyone has that opportunity. And that doesn't make me better than or less than anybody else, artistically speaking. But it just was my path, right? It was the way I got in. And I just love that, I didn't get, it's going to sound weird. I don't want to frame it like I'm pointing at anybody else, but I like the way I came up. I liked that I feel like I've earned all my stripes. Anything I get now just feels like bonus because I had a good career. I worked with a lot of good people. Does that make me a good artist or something that's going to be great? I don't know, but I don't care. What I do care about is that I have this love and this passion to find out who I am now, to not just be an assistant to helping someone else realize their dream and tell their story, but to tell the stories I've been trying to get out of myself since I was in high school. You know what I mean? To really see if I can resonate, because the bigger thing that was easier for me when I was young was to invest in my job, right? Invest in my career. I can control that. I understood that. It was time and energy, right? Easy to kind of calculate. What I couldn't understand is how I saw myself in the world, right? As a voice. Do I have a voice? Does anyone care about my voice? Is it worthwhile? Like all these external connections to what art is what I was connected to. I'm at this point now where I do want to connect, but my value system on what I create isn't really connected to what I think people will value. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned in my career by working on all these films with all these really good directors, is seeing what it takes to be all in, right? Seeing what it takes to be on that stage and own everything, to really keep a team healthy and develop something really great that makes it better than just what you would bring. You know what I mean? Like there's so much corralling, there's so much organization that goes into it more than just creative that, you find that in the end, if you believe in it, more than likely, and if you could speak to why you believe in it, more than likely the team that you have, most people just want to believe in somebody. They might even love your idea, but if they believe in you, they will believe in the project, which means they will make the project better with you, right?
Mhm.
That to me is the how I gauge what I make now. Is that I
Mhm.
love doing this. If I believe in it, I'm going to put myself all into it so that anyone involved can feed off of it. Because I believe that either you find a space that works for you, right? Like I want that pirate ship, but it just might so happen I have to build that freaking pirate ship myself, and then I'm gonna have to be the captain. Either one of those situations, I would love, But I've actually had majority of my career in this situation. I was a pirate with a captain. Now I'm at the point in my career where I think I have to keep that option open, but also be a pirate, because just like I'm making a quick connection to, kung fu or martial arts, is that you learn until a point where you have to teach and then you become a master, right? So I see it like that. Like, part of like that aspect of the part of my career is like where I'm going to teach, and I'm not teaching per se, but all I mean by teaching is leading, allowing the, experience that I've garnered through my career trying different things should hopefully make me a more well-rounded leader that is less caught up in the details and things that make things look a certain how I look in doing it versus what I'm trying to get done, right?
Mhm.
And those two things typically pull you apart. You know what I mean? Because who doesn't want it to be great? Who
Yeah.
doesn't want to like change minds and shape people and just go like, oh my God, like here's your Pulitzer, here's your whatever, here's your keys to the moon. You get to have the moon because you were so great. Like, and here's multiple staff. Like, not that anyone really, really wants it. I'm being stupid there, but the thing is that we do look for that connection. I'm not gonna lie. If I make something I love it and no one likes it, I'm gonna be a little bit hurt. But I love the idea of the journal entry, right? I love the idea that these are just things that we're trying to work out, and if they connect with the bigger audience, that's great, And I think there's ways that you can kind of allow it to have more insight or more accessibility. You know what I mean? I think family films are great because they're so accessible to a big audience. But that's not the only way to make a film. It's just a matter of that has more accessibility, right? So it's really up to like, what you want to explore, and what matters to you, right? And what you're willing to stand on to learn about yourself,
Yeah.
because that's to me ultimately where it goes.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's I think you would rather work on something that hurts if it doesn't get received well than like work on something, put it out, doesn't get received well, and you're like, whatever. You know what I mean? Like that if that it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
Like if it does well in that situation, you probably aren't even going to be that excited either. You're going to be like, yeah, it was good. But if you put your heart and soul into it, then I think the pain you feel when it doesn't work out and the joy you feel when it does is probably a lot stronger.
Well, that's the point I had, when we were talking, and probably it was before you started recording. But when I worked on Quest for Camelot, that I felt like that was the biggest difference between me and the people that had been in the industry for a while that were really upset by the movie, or that were like, kind of, they were like, oh man, this movie's not that great, But I had a great time because the perception's different, right? Like I understood that this was just a stepping stone in my journey, right? It was something that was really new to me. It was really exciting to me, and so the outlook of what it was doesn't bother me, right? Like I believe, and this is probably because I've been very lucky and fortunate to have worked on a lot of good films with a lot of good directors, that I find myself in this position where the result of the art that you make, I believe it's just a matter of timing. You can't control it, but what you can control, because animation takes like 3 to 5 years to make, it's a long time, it's a long process. What I can control is when that movie is done, did I do everything I could to try and elevate it, right? Discussions, drawings, ideas, whatever it is. Did I give my all? What was the team like? Did we all fight for it? You know what I mean? These are the things that allow me to accept it in the way that it is, right? Because if the team fought, I fought, and we all kind of had this idea and it just didn't work out, for whatever XYZ reason, I'm proud because I know what the intention was. And the result is something that I cannot control. I can't control the result. Imagine the box office of 2023, how crazy all those strategists of these studios must be throwing DEFCON 4. It must be like the nuclear, World War 4. And they're like, what do we do? Right? The usual bait that we throw out there isn't working. Like, and they're like, we threw big things at it, little things at it, nothing's sticking. And the stuff that's sticking, we don't quite understand, except we'll just say that it had previous IP. So that's for why it works so well. But they don't know, right? Because they don't know because where society's at is changing, and you could have like family films. I would love to see them, like I love film, seeing it in theater. I do. But you can't knock that a family with 3 or 5 people in it, that's like over $100 to go see it in the movie theater, right? And that's also, depending on how young the kids are, it's so much easier for a parent to just pay the $20 while it's in the theater still, watch it on TV, and have a life and be able to like save money and still get the kids to where they're going to go. So now that effectively takes, to a certain degree, it takes family films, animated films out of the theater, which sucks because I love them. They're crafted for the big screen. All these artists care about the big screen. They want to see it on the big screen, Sorry, I'm going long. I will
Oh,
turn
you're
this
okay.
around, but that Quest for Camelot screening, I love that. It was one of my favorite screenings. You know why? It's because it was in the Man's Chinese Theater with the big, big, big screen, right? With the history that's involved, right? With, all the movie stars that came throughout the decades that had their premieres there. All of a sudden I was a part of that history a little bit, You're connected to it a little bit. That's what
Yeah.
it is. I'm not a part of it. I'm connected to it.
Hmm.
And so like that to me is the genuine excitement about doing this thing is I want to be a kid that's excited by playing. I don't want to be the kid that's excited by the A or B I got. You know what I mean? Not that I was a great student. I wasn't, but like the grade is a different thing. And a grade doesn't really matter to me. Like cinema scores A plus and da da da. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like I don't care because it only matter. I can only control what I put into the project as it's given to me, as the world, as the time, as the space, has brought these pieces, right? And so I find that the thing that helps me the most is being flexible, planning for being flexible, planning for, allowing things to adjust and move, right? Because I do believe that when you're working on whatever it is you're working on, the world will give you things, but you have to be open to kind of knowing how to implement it, right? Or the fact that it could be implemented, right? I just feel like I have to be open to all things that come to me. And it's weird. It comes in weird ways. It might come from a conversation that you overhear in a coffee shop. Like, oh my God, that really clicks for this story. It could
Mm.
be talking to a friend, or it could be just out driving in the street and, something pops up because you saw something random. You know what I mean? That's oftentimes how I get my ideas. You know what I mean? It's like my cat got into a fight with a raccoon, right?
Oh no.
He's a roamer. Like actually, he's kind of a bit of a hoe, man. Like he lives in, like, he's our cat. We brought him. He wanted to go outside. He became an outside cat, and now he like visits all the neighbors, and all the neighbors feed him. So we always laugh because he left and he lives outside. We leave a bowl of food. He eats that, but yet he was still fat. You know what I mean? Not fat, but he was just had that bonza belly hanging. And
Yeah.
so he went outside. We were barely feeding him. He wasn't eating that much. And we're like, damn, how is he still so big? Come to find out, he was living in all the neighbors, right? He's getting food for everybody. Everybody knew the neighborhood cat, right? That's who he was. But he got into this fight with this raccoon. He was always fighting with other cats and stuff like that. And he would always come back with scars and little things. But this was the first time he was like, it was a bad one. So we brought him in. He let us clean it up. And he had this, like, because he was licking and cleaning, he has like this big patch of fur missing. You know what I mean? Oh, man. That's a cat that would XYZ. That's a cat that would get into like A plus A. You know what I mean? Like 1 + 1 to get to 2. That's a cat that would, and it just sparks something where you're like, oh my God, that's a connection to something. Why is that fascinating me so much? It
Hmm.
isn't just a surface level thing. There's deeper meaning to this cat that has like this open scar, because we all have open scars, right? That we try and hide. You know what I mean? And so you look at it, you start thinking about like, what is it that I connect to about it? You know what I mean? And what kind of interesting story could I tell? Because I don't want to tell a story that's like, let me tell you a morality tale that will help you live your life, right? I'm not trying to write the Bible. I'm not trying to write a religious meaning. I just want to connect to this thing that I'm interested in, right? In a subconscious level, in a deeper level.
Hmm.
But it's also important for me to look at like stories aren't just that. Stories are actually should be, I think, entertaining. Just like my favorite teachers are ones that would connect to me because they would speak in a very passionate way. I can get with that. I can't get with the teachers that are like, meh, 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 like just drone on, like, because they don't love their work, because they're
Yeah.
just having to do this,
Yeah.
and that's me. That was something I took from school that I always loved that when I teach now. Just in everything. It's like, I love it. If I don't love it, I don't talk about it. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Because I like talking about the things I love, people, connections, art, and how it interlaces and connects to everything. The fact that as an artist, it's hard to be an artist and not look at yourself in
Yeah.
some regard, right? Because otherwise you don't connect to the material, and
Hmm.
therefore no one else will. Nor can I try and like arbitrarily connect with someone I don't quite get because I feel like that's the way to move it. No, you know what I mean? Because it's either got to have some meaning and weight to me, or otherwise I don't want to do it, because otherwise I won't have my heart in it.
Yes. Yeah, it's like you remind me of this teacher I had where she just like my brother and I, well, even my sister to some extent, we'd have like parent teacher conferences and I hated her class so much. It was like I loved writing and all that stuff, and she was the writing teacher, and she'd
Ooh,
be like, sit in there, sit in your seat, be quiet, don't talk, don't move. Just do what you're told. And I was a kid who had a lot of energy and liked to
yeah.
talk. So, kicking my feet, talking to the person next to me. So we butted heads a lot. So she would go into parent teacher conferences and go to my parents and be like, do you know what your son did? He like kicked the seat in front of him on accident so many times, and he's gonna be lucky if he gets a job at the grocery store when he graduates. And like you have a teacher like that who clearly I don't think she probably really wasn't meant to be a teacher. But then you have the teacher that's like, she's teaching theater and she's up on stage showing the students how to speak the part and how to like read the part and how to show emotion and things like that. And you're like, damn, she's cool because she's kind of being herself. She's being fun. She like wants everybody to win. It's much easier to learn from somebody like that, I think, than somebody who doesn't want to be there. I guess the same thing goes for storytelling. There was another
Yeah.
question I had. where you get ideas from. You said something, you spoke about your cat and then just like driving down the road and stuff like that. And I think that's one thing is I used to ask like, where do you come up with ideas? But I think you come up with them just by living and observing. Like get
Yeah.
like kind of getting your face out from behind your phone because you're not going to come up with too many ideas looking at Instagram. But if you
But you
just
could.
watch, yeah, maybe I guess you know you might. I think people watching is one way. Like people watching
Yeah.
animals just going and doing stuff, and I think you probably end up writing those things into your stories. Maybe you don't tell everyone, but that's where you
Yeah.
pull your material from.
Well, I think that it goes back to like, you said, you probably wouldn't, but I feel like you could find anywhere. That's a part of being flexible. I was talking about earlier is
Mhm.
that I have to be open to the world, right? And it might come from, I might be some silly post, that's on Instagram that I'm like, oh my God, like that's hilarious. Doesn't mean I'm telling that story, but it sparks something else, right? I'm
Mhm.
just looking for sparks in my life, right? That's what I'm trying to be open and reactionary to, which means I'm not trying to focus too much on any one thing, which is where the subconscious lies, right? Walking, taking a shower, washing dishes, any menial task that your mind can just be on autopilot is a great place to find ideas. Walking, like conversations, you know what I mean? Like, not that you're going to take that wholesale and bring it over here, but anytime something like just sparks interest, I just want to be a kid. I want to be a kid that's open. I want to be like the young version of me that's just life is all interesting. Everything, you know? Doesn't mean I want to tell stories about everything. No. But I like that, I'm open to the world in that way. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like I'm open to the idea that I'm just looking for fun stuff to talk about. I'm looking for seeds. Like I said, I just want to plant seeds. They're not all going to sprout, but I do want to I want to keep planting because I don't know what's going to sprout. I have no control over that. All I have control over is what things draw my attention, what things kind of coalesce that I think life helps put together,
Mhm.
because I can't control that. All I can do is corral it and nurture it. You know what I mean? And then hopefully that's why I like the gardening analogy, right? Is because you plant the seed, you try and get it to grow. Doesn't mean it's going to grow. And it could grow and not yield fruit. And it could grow and yield little fruit. It can grow and yield big fruit. I will never know until I do it. So I think the big thing for me is just looking for ways I can be in action always, right? How do I stay in action? I don't want to sit back and wait for, opportunity or inspiration to strike. If I don't quite see it, I'm going to have stuff I can strike on myself, right? This is why it's important to have a whole nursery of seeds, right? Is because you nurture them all and you keep adding to it.
Yeah.
Not everything yields fruit. It just doesn't,
Yeah.
you know? But, I think the more you plant, the more you have, the more you are capable of yielding more fruit in a consistent way.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like it's like thinking about like bands, that have a great first album, right? Because they've been playing that album for like 5, 6, 7 years, right? Just playing it in like shitholes, in backyards, and garages, and weird spaces like that. But the album gets so refined that they end to this place where when they put that album out, it's so good. It's like a banger from top to bottom, right? And then they put out their second album and it's just like, what is this? You know what I mean? Like, it's not even like, it's kind of like the last stuff, but not even as good. You know what I mean? They weren't able to elevate, right? Because they honed this one thing. And I think that's great when you're honing it. But the idea is once they were honing it, that's detail work. There should be time. I always feel like there's two phases, right, that are constantly working, kind of like the tides. And that's the phase of honing, where you're getting the details, where things are a little bit more about the execution. And then you have the big 3,000-foot view, right? Where you're just looking over the land. How are the seeds doing? I know that one is growing really well and I'm tending to it. But also, what else do I need to tend to now to grow up? So when that one is taken, right? When it goes to market, I have something else already going that I love that I'm putting just as much time into, because I think it's really hard to just from start have an idea, a seed, and go, I'm going to write this. It's going to be a good thing, because most good things that I've either read about or, read, the creatives talking about it or not, is always like, there's always this track record of having this idea for like 5 to 10 years where it sat, it was exciting. They wrote a first draft and then put it in the drawer. Right. The director of Parasite was like that. He's like, I wrote this and then I put it in the drawer because I took this other thing on. And then when I back to it, I went and rewrote it, and then I got it ready for Parasite. That's just, I think it's a good thing to have, is to constantly work, right? Noah
Mhm.
Hawley is like that, where he's working. My favorite story is Isaac Asimov, right?
Mhm.
And Isaac Asimov is a story that I carry with me because I love this notion that, again, he wasn't about the result of the work. He was working on things that generally interested him first. And then he had partners that put his stuff out because it was a certain quality, right? But I remember this article because it was this reporter, going to interview him about his book being number one, right? One of his books, I forget which one. Number one on the New York Times bestseller list. And she, the reporter's like, hey, so did you know, like, how does it feel for your book to be number one? And he turns to her like and is like, "Oh, is it? Once I finish my story, I'm on to the next idea." Right. So he's not sitting around waiting for like, how does it respond? Watching his inbox or his YouTube channel to start sprouting up viewers or whatever. He's
Yeah.
like, done. I mean, I think even if you look at Stephen King or some of these prolific writers, just like that. They're onto these ideas. They're looking for things to talk about. They're not
Yeah.
looking for results in the same way. I think it's good to have those results, and I think it's necessary to keep, But I think that comes from craft, right? Like once you have good craft, once you understand where you're going, it becomes a little bit easier to continue that process of nurturing seeds while you're finishing one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's reps, really. It's like, the first one you do is probably gonna suck. Like, and
Oh yeah,
it's gonna take a lot of reps, a lot of seeds planted before, and then eventually I think what happens is as you do it, even if you release them out to the public or not, you kind of start to get, maybe you develop taste, maybe, or develop
yeah.
craft, as you were saying, where you can kind of tell already if it's good or not. And maybe that comes from, I was reading, you ever read any Brandon Sanderson stuff?
No.
He's a fantasy writer. He just did like one of the biggest Kickstarters ever, because
Oh wow.
this guy just puts out, he's got like every year he puts out like a couple of books that are 1,200 pages long, so he's just crazy, man. And
Yeah.
so I've started reading his stuff. His writing level is so high that when I go to write my stuff, I'm just like, damn, that sucks. Like, where you're, so even from consuming high quality, like the highest level of talented people that clearly care a lot and are very good, I think that makes you better too. Maybe that's as important as getting the reps in. So you kind of, it's another way to develop that taste.
Well, I think that all reps aren't equal, right?
Hmm.
And in my mind, when I think about this, like, and I do this, but I don't do it as much as I used to. Is the same thing you just said, which is I'm not, my writing's nowhere near as good as his. It doesn't have to be, right? Like that self outlook is really hard to build anything interesting on because you're comparing yourself to things that you don't need to compare yourself to, right?
Right.
However, knowing that he's a writer that you like and a writer that you want to kind of adhere to be like, it's more interesting to understand why they do what they do and how they
Mhm.
approach it, right? Because then it becomes a way that you can actually help yourself rather than hurt yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because it's one of the two, either I'm going to take this as inspiration, I'm going to just boil it down to the things that really matter to me, because not everything does. And it can't be boiled down or compared to an outlook, right? Or a goal or what it achieved, right? It has to be like I like looking at old artists. And there was this artist, Noel Sickles. I used to have this quote above my wall when I was drawing a lot, which was, he was just basically like, he was like, young artists, like don't necessarily understand that this, in order to find something really good, you have to constantly turn it over and search until your searching stops and you know when that is. And I always found that interesting to me because it was like the idea that, we're our own worst enemy, which you've all heard, but the way that applies here to me is that we are looking for comfort. We want it to be done. Once we have the idea, we want it to be done. And what is beauty and the fun and the frustration is what's in between of idea and done, right? It's all the hard work and struggle and pleasure
Yeah.
and pain that goes along with it that we want to jump over,
Hmm.
right? And it's not because we're bad people or anything like that. It's just human nature. We love comfort. We want safety. We want this at a core level. So why wouldn't we want to like not do the hard work of looking at yourself and understanding like this sucks, like the invariable, like, second act rewrite or second draft where it's like, oh my God, this really sucks. Like everything that I loved about this, I don't know what it is anymore. You know what I mean? My second act is sagging like no one's business. All that hardship is necessary to complete something interesting, right? All those rewrites, all that investigation, all that deep dive, into it, to where you don't know where it's going to go is all important. And there's nothing to judge there. It's
Hmm.
either you're either passionate and obsessive about this idea that'll drive you, or you're not, right? But you have to pick a lane. You know what I mean? I think that, again, it goes back to like, if I'm waiting for opportunity or insight or inspiration to strike, I'm going to be sitting for a long time doing nothing, feeling really shitty, making up a lot of dumb shit about my life, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna tell my friends I'm sitting there waiting. I'm like, no, I'm totally working on these great ideas. You know what I mean? And I got so much going on. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, it's like when Facebook came out and like people be like, oh my God, my relationship with my spouse is so amazing. And you find out it's not. They were projecting, and I don't want to project.
Yeah, that always cracks me up, because whenever I see those spousal posts, like when they're like obsessive, you're just like, I have no comment. But you're just like, I don't know. But it's like you're kind of putting on a front where you always know the truth. Like you always know if you're putting in the work, right? Like if you're doing the
Yeah.
stuff necessary. And I think I have like a travel YouTube channel, and our best video was one that took me, God, an insane amount of time to edit. And
Yeah.
I look at it now and I still don't think it's like if I could edit it again, I would cut like 30% of the time.
Yeah.
But it's the only one where I like, man, I learned so many different editing things. I learned how to do like map animations and all this stuff. And it took me so like an insane amount of time. Plus I like what happens when you like unplug your hard drive too soon and it corrupts all the files.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that and I like lost half the timeline. I was like,
Oh, what a great learning opportunity, though.
but it's been our most viewed video, and it's been the best one. And because I have other work that I do, I don't have time to put like 60 hours into every 5 minute video I do. But that one I just felt like was really special, so I put everything into it. And then when it did well, I was like, all right, like that's cool, like I felt like I
Yeah.
earned it. Like the it's something you can tell too when you consume other people's stuff is I don't know, maybe you know what I mean, where if you watch a movie, like I'm trying to think of what was the one movie that did really well, like last year, 2 years ago, Everything, Everywhere at Once.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching that movie and I was just like, I was probably 20 minutes in and I was like, what? I almost shut it off. I'm like, what am I watching? This is like the worst thing I've ever seen. And then
Wow.
by the end of it, I'm like, damn, this is probably like one of my favorite movies. And I think with something like that, it just felt like the people involved cared a lot
Yeah.
and they put a lot into it. Whereas if you watch something else, or maybe people watch like the new Marvel movies now or something, and they kind of feel like maybe there's not as much, they don't feel the same way as they did about the first ones, right? Like Iron Man, Captain America, stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, everything's in cycles for us, right? I mean, when Marvel came out, there was nothing like it, so it was incredibly popular, and then they had the whole idea of, kind of ending it with the Avengers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then where do you go from there? Like, how do you reboot that same excitement, where you build all these characters that are intertwining to meet up at this time after 10, 15 years, whatever it is? That is unheard of in films, right? That
Yeah.
has never been done before. Just like a trilogy, like when the Lord of the Rings, the fact that he was working all three at the same time, that didn't happen until that point, really.
Yeah.
So you have these notions of what I love about him. My takeaway from them is always like they were gambles because they hadn't been done before. You know what I mean? And I feel like when you gamble smartly, mind you, that you can both have artistic integrity and make some money, to keep these kind of things going. But again, trying to correct the market, maybe they knew it, maybe they didn't. I mean, look at
Yeah.
Pixar. Pixar was the first CG animated house, and they could have died on the on the operating table when they showed their first screening or second screening, I forget what it was, of Toy Story to Disney, and they were like, "This character, I don't like him. There's too mean, like Woody,
Yeah.
and all this X, Y, Z." And they're like, "All right, we're gonna shut it down." And they're like, "Give us a couple months, right? And then if after
Mhm.
that, if we don't turn around, then shut us down, right? Turn it around. This is the Toy Story we all know now, right?" So again, it goes back to like, there's a certain amount of like what you want out of it that has nothing to do with really the result. But I do believe that you can't get the result you want without having the love and putting in the work and dealing with the frustrations of really trying to develop and see and explore what this could be, what it is, right? And
Mhm.
we always don't have the answer, but I think if you don't do that work, it's really hard to get a result that you think you would find acceptable, because it's really about the time and energy that you put into it, right?
Mhm.
And not that you force yourself, but that you are so into it that you are compelled to, you
Mhm.
know? I think that's where a lot of it comes from, is there has to be this like thing inside that's just driving you to
Mhm.
answer this question. This story raises this question in my mind, and this character, this situation has helped me both enjoy the telling of it, but also exploring it.
Yeah, you're leaving me with a lot of things to think about later. I'm gonna take a walk after this and
Right
and do
on.
some reflecting because I'm like, yeah, I listened to this talk yesterday that was it was like, is content creation the new 9 to 5? Where once you kind of start to get into that cycle where you're just cranking stuff out to the point where something that maybe you started because it was fun or
Yeah.
what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, fun, or it's your passion, or you're just doing it as a hobby. And then all of a sudden now, because it's done so well and you're trying to stay ahead of the algorithm, you just have to keep putting stuff out and faster.
Yeah.
And then people just like they interviewed some woman who I don't remember, some famous rapper, and she was like, I hate going to the studio because all the stuff I put out, like I don't like it, but it's what people want.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like I don't know, it's like in the way things, I feel like we have like two sides of things kind of going on right now, where there's like this deeper art side of like some maybe film or things that take months or years to put together, and then when they come to life, it's like a big moment for a lot of people. And then you have this on the other side where it's like, can I get 3 or 5 videos out a day about like
Yeah.
whatever I feel like that day? And I don't know, I just would like to hear, maybe this is like a final, I have like maybe one other question, but maybe like this question one more and then we can wrap up. But what are your thoughts on that whole thing where you have this, I don't know if dichotomy is the right word, but you have this like two different sides, two different ways.
I mean, I think that it's like they feed each other, right? It's the
Hmm.
yin and yang of it all. You know what I mean? There's like the purist artist, like, I believe this and this is the way I see it. Like, I've seen many directors, like, they won't let me make my movie. And I'm like, as soon as you ask for their money, as soon as you're working with this partnership, it is all of your movie, right?
Hmm.
There's no separation. Yeah,
Yeah.
you are driving and yeah, you are trying to work out this idea, but you did agree to this relationship, That's like me getting married and going like, hey, I want only certain things, right, to be my way. You know what I mean? But that partner on the side is like, well, I have needs too. We both got into this
Mhm.
together, And I think in terms of business, that's the healthiest way to look at it is like, I'm developing relationships. Like, this isn't just about me. I might be the leader and driving this forward and might have the idea and all that kind of stuff. But again, I have to realize that without these partners, meaning, both studio and team, this shit would never get done. I mean,
Mhm.
not on this scale, like there's only so much as an animator you can do on a certain scale that you can do over a certain amount of time to get something done, right? Short films on it with an animator that's working on their own, it's going to take years, for like 5 minutes,
Yeah.
let
Yeah.
alone for a team of 600 to do, a 90-minute to a, 100-minute film is 5 to 8 years. You know what I mean? So for me, it's like there's that they both go hand in hand,
Mhm.
but I think that I can't control I can only try to develop great relationships. You're dealing with people and now you have to feel like, you have to have a good handle on that, right?
Mhm.
Understanding that not everyone's coming at you because they disagree with you, they don't like you or like the idea. They're trying to figure it out. And it's my job to help them understand it. So if I take it from a place of defensiveness, is if I have my artist hat on about what I think about it, now I'm going to be defensive,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
But if I go with an open mind to hear what they're saying, even if it's dumb ideas, you know what I mean? It's like, well, can we, I love that joke in The Simpsons. Can we Rostify it by like 15%? You know what I mean? You're like, what does that mean? But they're doing dials about what that is. And you can always go like, oh, I hear you. Yeah, let me try that out. And maybe you don't do it. If they really press upon it, then you truly try. I think it's good to, again, be flexible to find ways to make this thing work, because if I'm blocking everything out, then I'm not open. Right? How good could
Mhm.
it be? Right?
Yeah.
I think ideas are made better by, more hands or more minds, but
Yeah.
at the same time, it doesn't mean we walk exactly the same, right? Someone has to lead. Someone has to be the captain of this pirate ship, to go like, hey, port side, we got to hit that way. Or,
Mhm.
someone's got to look at the bigger picture of what's coming so that the team can continue to like do what they want to do. Right.
Yeah.
And so like, knowing your lane and knowing the situation that you are in and accepting it and figuring out how you want to work with it in a way that feels healthy to you is everything. Right.
Mhm.
To me, that's the core component is, I just want to be all in with people that I, feel like they're all in with me. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So we can either make something or I can help them make something. It isn't a matter of whether it's me or somebody else. It's just a matter of like, that's the feeling. That's the feeling of home to me that I'm
Mhm.
searching for. Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to force it. I don't want to fake it. I want to find it. I want it to be natural. And if I don't find it, I want to build it. It's one of the two. Right. Because if I'm not doing either one of those two, what am I doing? You
Mhm.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's like the self-awareness to know. And if you don't have that, then like, you could be you could it might make more sense for you to work in like the 5 to 8 year range where when you're done, you have this like beautiful thing that you and a lot of other people have worked on. I think it's also just like, being okay. Like, don't, like you said, I think you've said it a bunch of times, don't be tied to the result as much as
Yeah.
like the effort you put in, because you can't control the effort. You can spend 8 years on something and put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, and that you and everyone else that works on it, and just no one likes it. And that's
Yeah.
okay.
It's really okay. I mean, I think by and large, for me, the two core components that I'm always looking at is just, it's the idea. But once you have the idea, everyone has ideas.
Hmm.
The thing that separates what the ideas can become, and if they even make it out of the let's make it into the soil, let's just say,
Hmm.
you have to have a love for the craft. And
Yeah.
that craft isn't like I've read a lot of books and I know a lot of things. That craft is I need to go apply this, and that's when the rubber meets the road, and that's when you are at your most vulnerable, and that's when you're going to be the least likely to be like, oh, I'm so excited by this idea. You're like, what the hell am I doing? Forget this. I'm going to take the night off. I'm going to binge a series on whatever streaming platform. But it's the fight, right? It's
Yeah.
the struggle that we choose, right? It's the suffering that we choose. And the craft is suffering, but it isn't always suffering. I think that the suffering is in trying to understand what the pieces mean, right? Understand its meaning, its worth it to you. But then the other part of craft is also how you arrive at that, what you
Yeah.
try to try and corral it and jostle it to sit right, the aggregator, as it were. If this was, I'm making another analogy, but it doesn't matter. But the idea that, the craft is inherently hard, but that's where you learn so much. That's also where you really figure out who you are, is by going through that workout of finishing a project. So when you were talking about that one video that you put a lot into because you really cared about it, that's great, but the question is, how come you don't put that same energy into all of the things you do, right?
That's
Because you learn so much. The outcome is the one thing, right? You could put that same energy into another thing and not have the same outcome, right? Does that make that energy spent less worthy? You know what I mean? It doesn't. What it does do is it makes you more better to become consistent, right? The next time you do it, you put the same kind of effort in, right? You're learning. That might even be a huge success in the first one. It may be worse than the second one. But every time you put yourself in that situation, you make yourself stronger to do something great. I think that's where it comes down to. If you want to get back to like, either Jordan or Kobe, where it's like, you miss all the, or I think it might even be Gretzky, you miss all the shots you don't take. You know what I mean? You have to take those shots. You have to miss a lot. You have to put yourself in a position where you're being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? You're comfortable with being uncomfortable. That is, to me, the underlying thing about all art and all things, relationships. You're not going to have it your way every time, right? You get married, you have a partner.
Yeah.
Part of it is also kind of giving the leeway to go like, you know what? Okay, I don't have to fight for everything I love. I can, extend a bridge. I can kind of help this become something more because of some of its parts versus what I need. You know what I mean? So that to me is always like its fundamental core at the very bottom is just, how you bring yourself to this, the suffering that you are choosing to develop, and how you want to, exert and work through this thing, to love this process enough that even at its hardest, which it is very hard, to see your way through that dark tunnel to the light is like our mental gym. It's our mental, like, physicality of trying to be better than who we are. Our stories should be absolutely better than who we are, right? If we tell the stories of just who we are, there are going to be a lot of like really sad stories out there, given the fact that we like to, compare ourselves to other people and judge ourselves so harshly over the things that we think we should do or deserve to have. That
Yeah.
shit's all in your mind, I mean, that's the mind killer, you know what I mean? And so like freeing your mind is being flexible, right? Being fluid with things and allowing things to come into your life and just really look at it, right? When you're going for a walk, do you just walk and like ignore everything around you? Chances are you probably look at the houses you've seen 100 times before when your walks, but you might see something different that time, you know? You're gonna then that little something that you change that changes your perception on that house gives you a story idea that you want to explore about a house that it has a history, and you didn't realize that history that you're going to tell through this house, or has a story underneath where someone's been trapped or something happened nefarious before. You know what I mean? You just allow your mind to play, right? Because if you're not in that fluid state of allowing your subconscious and conscious to mix, right? Because you can only do that if you're not in judgment. You can only do that if you're open, right? If you're relaxed and you're not putting importance on how you're seen or what it's like compared to other ideas. One of the worst things I hear is, oh, that's just like this idea. I'm like, yeah, but think about this, right? If you had Scorsese, right, and you have, let's just say, the Russo brothers, right? You have Marvel and you have, Killers of the Flower Moon or whatever you want, Goodfellas, let's just say. Or how about this? You have Spielberg, right? Spielberg making Schindler's List. Very, very, very close to him. You have Scorsese doing the guys that he grew up around, right? If they had each made that other person's movie, they'd be good movies, but they wouldn't have the connection that they bring to it, the insight, which is here, not here. You can only get so far here if you're not balancing it between the two. Just like balancing it between yourself and others, just like when you're trying to balance between judgment and non-judgment, right? Allowing things to be things. This is the yin and yang of life, yin and yang of creativity, right? Is like there's usually two sides of it, a dark and a light side. And we have to understand how to mix between the both, right? Because we can't just choose light, can't just choose darkness. We have to choose to find balance and strike balance between these things that we notice that allow us to move freer than it is to kind of work within these really strict confines of I need to be this or I want it to be that, right? Where
Hmm.
I'm trying to control the outcome. I want to embrace these entities and celebrate and discover an outcome. I want to find Montezuma's gold, right? I want to find the Fountain of Youth. I don't want to like make the map to the Fountain of Youth. I don't want to make the map to my, I want to discover this shit. I want it to be a creative discovery so that it feels as fresh to me as it does to the audience. Because if it's not fresh to me, if I'm not feeling it, then why the hell would anybody else feel it, right? How am I connecting? Energy, right? Passion is very, very, very addictive, right? People want
Yeah.
to be around passionate people. That's
Hmm.
why we love the leaders we love in certain times. I mean, and this,
Hmm.
I'm not getting political here, but like Trump draws and gives passion to people that, understand him in that way. When we have these leaders, they have this passion for what they believe in that we are, yeah, let's go, right?
Hmm.
That to me is what I love about art, about making films, is that I get to be passionate and I don't have to like work a job that could potentially drain the passion. I mean, it doesn't mean every job is like that. Just because you work at the post office doesn't mean you're drained of life. It might help you see your life in a certain fixed way, but it may not. You know what I mean? I just think it's getting older and understanding that some things aren't as important as you think they are. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? But you're coming out of high school where everyone's evaluating how you look, how you talk, and what you like. When you go into your 20s, what else are you going to take in your 20s or talk about in your 20s besides that, right? We're always talking about the things that happened in the past. So when you get in your 30s, it's about that discovery you made in your 20s. When you get in your 40s, it's about the discoveries you made in your 30s, 20s, and teens, right? Seen through a different lens. And therefore, it's always a self-exploration, in a regard where you celebrate with other people so that we can all feel connected. And I feel like that's what the passion is for. The passion is to connect at a simple level, at our biological cellular level. Art is a means to connect.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think I kind of want to wrap it up on that note because I think it was fantastic.